just on me.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Exactly.
So I'm here in Boulder, Colorado. Is well known to be a bastion of green, just on me, right? And we had a rough day yesterday. This year we've already okayed Monsanto GMOs on our open space. We've okayed Walmart coming in, and now we've okayed fracking in Boulder County. 2 of the 3 Boulder County commissioners voted for it, and the whole town's in a state of confusion. And if only we had like a magical sort of expert available to us who knew something about fracking.
I think you're referring to...
Yeah. So that would not be Redford the dog. That would be Josh Fox, the director, the creator of Gasland. I first heard about Gasland when you were on Jon Stewart, I think, right?
That's right. They don't allow dogs on Jon Stewart.
Yeah, not yet.
Right.
They will after our ratings because of Redford. Yeah, people love watching Red. So, Josh, thanks for coming to town. It's amazing.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, it's amazing timing.
It's very daunting what's happening right now. We both yesterday lost the moratorium in Boulder and the fracking ban in Longmont. Not Longmont, Fort Collins.
Right.
And those 2 things happened in the evening as we were driving across Kansas to get here, and we had a rough morning in Illinois. I testified in front of the state Senate.
Wow. And
they're passing, it looks like they are poised to pass a regulations bill to open up all of Illinois for fracking.
Wow.
So we're under siege. And
do you feel like it's sort of these string of defeats will almost be a positive, that it'll wake the population up?
Well, I don't think you ever want to have that.
No.
I think people are awake. Right now. I think the problem is that our legislators and the people who represent us are not. You know, when I was testifying in the Illinois State Senate yesterday morning, that was yesterday morning, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh my God, it seems like a year ago.
Busy man.
When you travel 2 or 3 time zones in a couple of days, you
Wow.
get disoriented. But, I mean, on the ground.
Right.
I was saying there's multiple layers to this. You know,
Yeah.
there's the layer of what's happening with the people. People know what's going on. People know what it feels like to have your community industrialized, to have all of a sudden your water start becoming flammable or contaminated with other substances, to have your air polluted and your health all of a sudden start to have strange effects and things at risk. And it's very clear from the standpoint of everybody who's in the drilling target zone, and it's a huge amount of territory. It's 34 states. You're talking about huge amount of Colorado, right? A lot of Wyoming, 3/4 of Pennsylvania, half of New York State, half of Ohio, all of West Virginia, and big section of California. We're headed out to California next. And those folks on the ground know what it means to have multinational oil and gas companies coming in to try to take away the character of the area, the health of the area, the environmental quality of the area, and industrialize the whole place. That's very clear.
And even the real estate value. Like even on a
course.
business level, you can't get insurance, right? That kind of stuff.
Well,
for a home that's in fracking zone. Or
Tonight we're doing the premiere of Gasland 2, which shows, in Colorado premiere, which shows a lot of families who were fighting against the industry and ended up having to move because their homes are now worthless, their health is under siege, their property absolutely has been devalued and handed over to these large multinational oil companies that are very good at saying things like, oh, American energy independence and jobs and everything is safe and clean, but it's not true. None of these things are true if you actually examine them. The problem is that when you get to the level of the people who are representing us, these companies have enormous power within our democracy. They can influence elections, they can influence congressmen, they can influence senators, and at the state level, it's much worse. And talking about small regulatory commissions at the state level, those are easier to pick off even than you're seeing the influence at the federal level. So what this film does, which is another next step from the first film talks about water contamination, air pollution, health problems. This film is about another layer of contamination due to fracking, which is the contamination of our democracy. So it's not surprising to me that you have these, city councils or whoever the county commissioners were subject to that kind of pressure. But what the answer is that those people are still very much accountable to the voters. They're accountable to us. We hire and fire them. So it has to be known. The bright spot yesterday, Bill Peduto, the only candidate for mayor in Pittsburgh who was strongly anti-fracking to maintain the ban, won resoundingly. Wow. So we have to now take this to the polls and make sure that people like Governor Frackenlooper in Colorado all the way up to the leadership of the Democratic Party and the President Obama know that this is their base. That they can't just betray these values and open up huge sections of the United States, including right now Boulder County, right, to the frackers. Because if you just go over to Weld County in the red zone, where there's 50,000 operating wells in Weld County, you'll see the hell that's over there.
I read there was 19,000.
19,000. Well,
yeah.
I got a statistic from Shane Davis, who is our Colorado campaign coordinator.
Yeah. We'll have to go out and count.
Yeah. Well, it's unbelievable though. Every
you brought up one thing I'd love to highlight, which is people sometimes tend to think, oh, this is just like a liberal, like environmentalist kind of conspiracy thing. But Longmont voted to ban fracking, and they're more conservative.
Right.
And the Democratic governor kind of has been, overruling them, right?
Well,
basically.
I spend just as much time in red states as I do in blue states.
It's a human
red people as much as I do with blue people,
Yeah.
In this film, Calvin Tillman, the mayor of Dish, Texas, he goes on a little monologue and he says, I used to be a Republican, and now I'm an independent. As a conservative, you have to stand up for private property rights. That's a principle of conservatism. And you have no private property rights, not in Texas. So he's moved on the spectrum. At the same time, you got people in Pennsylvania, you can roll up in central PA and up on the porch like this, you've got a big anti-fracking sign, and right next to it is a sign that says, "Don't tread on me." So this cuts across, on the ground, it cuts across partisan lines, and it's not an ideological issue when you have people who have their health under siege. But unfortunately, in Washington and in the state capitals, you have that division where the Republicans are just not listening to us at all. They won't answer the phone.
Really?
There are very, very few Republicans who are actually even listening to their own constituents from red areas that are talking about these issues. We have our work cut out for us, even with just the Democrats. Like I said, Governor Frackenlooper, he's moonlighting as an oil and gas spokesman.
But you must have
or he's moonlighting as governor, and he's actually just a oil and gas spokesman.
No, he's been a bummer for us. We all loved him a couple years ago.
It's a bummer.
But you must have support of like Congressman Polis or Senator Udall.
Of course.
And
Jared Polis has been terrific. Diana DeGette has been terrific here in Colorado. There are a lot of people who clearly see the problem, and we did 12 or so congressional interviews for Gasland too. We had much greater access than we had for the first one. The first one was like, "Who are you? Why should we give you an interview?" I mean, I was basically driving around the country in a beat-up '92 Toyota Camry and said, just pull up on people's houses and can we talk about fracking? And now, obviously there's a different level of engagement, but there are a lot of folks in Congress who get it. The problem is that they're not in the majority. And there are a lot of Democrats who right now are not with their constituencies and understanding the threat that this is.
So final question, a simple question but a hard answer probably is, let's say you're the football coach with this is the problem going on. How do we defeat this? How do we turn it around?
Well, I actually, as a filmmaker, I'm more the cheerleader. Because what we're here to do is to support the local initiatives. That's why we're doing this grassroots tour. It's unlike it's a film that's going to be on HBO July 8th. It'll be beaming into nearly 40 million homes. But we were able to work with them and say, we want to go to the grassroots first. We want to give them this opportunity to get people to come into their organizations and to fundraise and to do all the things that an event like this would provide for the local organizers. Having said that, I think it's very, very important to not fall into what can be a typical compromise mindset, which is to say we can regulate this. This is an industry that won't be regulated and can't be regulated. We see Colorado saying, well, we've got the best regulations in the country. Pennsylvania saying we've got the best regulations in the country. And you have a health crisis emerging along the western slope with 8,000 wells in the I-70 corridor between Parachute and Rifle, or more than that.
What's the health crisis? What's going on?
Well, there's multiple things. And Colorado's own Theo Colborn is the pioneer on this, and you can look at all the chemicals that are used in the process and all the health effects at her website, which is tedx.org. But you have approximately between 700 and more than that known chemicals that are used in the process. And those chemicals are injected into the ground. They're also sucked back up out of the well, put in open pits, holding ponds. They're transported on our roads. They're sprayed on the roads as dust suppressant. There's a lot of things that are both legal and extra legal that the industry is doing. They have disinfectants that they clean off these pads with to break up the oil and grease because people are slipping and falling, and those are volatilizing into the air, into the community. And we don't know the long-term health effects of chronic exposure at low levels to communities. We are asking about that. But from Theo's work, and I'm going to see her on Friday, there are all sorts of effects. These are endocrine disruptors. A lot of them are carcinogens. They're neurotoxins. And the people who are at most direct peril of that, and Colorado School of Public Health did a preliminary health impact assessment a few years ago that said that people were at a risk of health effects from these chemicals in the areas. But the workers are dealing with these things 24/7. They're on the pads, they're inhaling them, they're handling toxic liquids that they're not being told what they are, they're not placarded on the roads, they don't have proper safety equipment. In most cases, they're not wearing masks, they're not wearing hazmat suits, they're being thrown out there. And what I've been doing recently is interviewing workers who have really been mangled by the industry, both in heavy industrial accidents. This industry is 7 times more likely to kill you on the job, 7 times more likely than any job in America. But there's also a chemical risk that when you're exposed to these types of neurotoxins. Jose Lara here in Colorado died of 2 different forms of cancer. This was a man who was sent down into the frack ponds and into the condensate tanks to steam clean them in jean shorts, no respirators, nothing. Wow. Bathing in carcinogens, literally. And those people who are living, if you had a well right on the corner here, yeah, you would have a certain level of chronic exposure to low levels of those chemicals because the well sites themselves vent off volatile organic compounds. This is not something that you can put in a residential area. This is not something that you can put in a wildlife area without impacts. This is not something you can put, you know, we have to distance ourselves from the dirty, toxic energy of the past and move into renewable energy. And what people we're gonna be able to provide today is some access to community solar tonight at the screening. And we're going to be able to organize people to get their own communities off of fossil fuels and do that in a vigorous way.
Well, that's one thing that's sort of lost in this conversation. There's a lot of finger pointing, but we're all using natural gas and oil. So if we can get on solar and wind and,
well,
right?
The real ban, right? We have a moratorium. Hi. The real ban on fracking is to replace the fuel. So that's work that has to be done. And you know, what we're hoping is that people can come to these screenings or events in the future, come as individuals, leave as groups, yeah, leave as transition towns, leave as units that are teams that are trying to figure this out on a community level, because you can't fix this problem just as an individual. You're going to quickly hit a lot of dead ends. People have to come together into a community development for renewable energy, and there are resources that are poised right now to do that. A community can develop a solar farm, you know, and somewhere far away. It doesn't have to be on your roof. Right. There are only a small percentage of people can afford to put the solar panels on their roof. So the best thing to do is to put it out somewhere in a field or on a highway overpass or something, yeah, and then everyone is buying into that community solar. That's one way to do it. So there's a greater level of democracy involved with renewable energy. You're not dependent on these multinational corporations that are not only messing up the environment and people's health, but they're totally altering the way our democracy functions.
Well, and renewables also obviously create domestic jobs and
totally,
yeah,
and they don't go away. And
yeah,
the per kilowatt hour job creation of renewables is much higher than fossil fuels, and they're not toxic jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, Theo Colborn actually said to me on the phone 3 days ago, if my son asked me if I should go to war or work for the gas industry, I would say go to war. Because it's safer, and because if you get, at least in theory, when you come home, there's someone there who is responsible for taking care of you. The gas industry mangles you and walks away. And this is what I've seen, you know, and that's strong. From yeah, the mother of this movement, from the woman who investigated all these chemicals on her own at 87 years old in Paonia, Colorado.
Wow.
That's intense. So that's not a job development strategy. That's a fire sale. That's an exploitation economy. And the reason why they're able to do that right now, my belief is that they are able to have an impact on our democracy at a level that takes an enormous amount of citizen participation to overcome. It can be overcome, but it takes a huge amount of citizen participation to get in the face of those.
So what can we do in terms of participation? Like as simple as we all have Facebook walls and blogs and, you know, what can we do?
The online stuff is okay.
Yeah.
But you got to show up.
Well, we call it activism.
You got to show up.
Yeah.
Being involved in activism means showing up. Which is why we're showing the film and not just putting on TV and saying, "Oh, click this link."
But
you got to show
film
up.
Or,
you have when you come to the film where there's an anti-fracking organization in every tiny little town in New York State.
Yeah.
In the Southern Tier, in most towns in PA, all throughout Colorado. They're not hard to find, and we have links to some of those on our website at Gasland the Movie. So you have to volunteer, but more importantly, you have to just get involved and figure out how to participate. This is a democracy. It means we participate in our own self-governance, and when we do that, it often means going to a hearing like the ones last night and being a force and being a presence, and that means all those tactics, because the truth is, it's protests, it's petitions, it's writing letters, it's signing, it's showing up, it's going to see your legislators, and when necessary, however, it's obeying the higher authority of a moral law that's above the law that these people who are under the influence of the oil and gas industry just passed, which means you may have to commit acts of civil disobedience. You know, be prepared that this movement is in that spot where we're being pushed up against the wall. You here in Boulder should not be opening up this place to fracking. What happened to those 3 county commissioners? Who influenced them besides the people who live here when they obviously don't want that? So what does it mean? It may mean that nonviolent civil disobedience is in order to make this move forward. But on the other side of it, it is just amassing, organizing, making sure that in this democracy, it's like my friend John Fenton from Wyoming said at a speech recently. He said, "In America, you matter, but you have to make yourself matter."
Yeah, you have to show.
It's not like one of those countries where you don't matter at all. There are systems where people they don't matter at all. In America, you matter, but in this moment, you have to make yourself matter.
Good for you. Well, thank you. We'll make ourselves matter.
All right.
Josh Fox, fracking.
Okay.
Fracking sucks. It's been said before.
All right.
Good man.